Valsara stepped off the transport ship and immediately felt the weight of 100 different minds pressing against. Her thoughts, Galactic Unity Station was crowded with species from across the known universe, and their mental noise was almost overwhelming. She raised her natural shields and took a deep breath. She was the Sari, one of the Mind Waivers. Her people could read thoughts as easily as others read words on a page. It was a gift that made them powerful diplomats and feared enemies. But here on this neutral station, she was just a junior, attached, sent to observe and learn. Her superior, Commander Tenrique, had given her clear instructions before she left. Be careful around the humans, he had said, his silver eyes cold. They are mind dark, we cannot read them. This makes them dangerous and untrustworthy. Keep your distance. Velara had nodded and promised to be careful. She had heard stories about humans all her life. They came from a death world called Earth, a planet so hostile that it had forged them into something terrifying. They were violent, unpredictable, and, worst of all, their minds were close to the Sari abilities. So when she saw the human waiting for her at the docking bay, she felt her stomach tightened with unease. He was not particularly tall or impressive. He had brown hair cut short and a face that seemed designed to be forgotten. He wore the simple uniform of station security, and he stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching her approach with calm gray eyes. Diplomat Valsara, he asked. His voice was quiet and polite. Yes, she said, keeping her tone cold. And you are Daniel Carter. I've been assigned as your security escort during your stay on the station. Velara felt a flash of irritation. I do not need a security escort, especially not a human one. Daniel's expression did not change. I understand, but station protocols require all diplomatic personnel to have security support. I'll try to stay out of your way. She wanted to argue, but she knew it would be pointless. Humans were stubborn creatures. Instead, she simply walked past him, expecting him to follow. He did, staying 3 steps behind her, close enough to respond to any threat, but far enough to give her space. She tried to ignore him, but his presence was strange. When she reached out with her mind, she felt nothing from him. It was like standing next to a shadow. He was there, but his thoughts were completely hidden from her. It was deeply unsettling. The days that followed were filled with meetings and ceremonies. Thara met diplomats from dozens of species. She smiled and spoke the proper words and played her role perfectly, and always Daniel Carter was nearby, watching everything with those quiet gray eyes. He never spoke unless spoken to. He never complained. He simply did his job with a calm efficiency that she found almost annoying. She wanted to dislike him, but he gave her no reason to. He was polite, professional, and completely unremarkable. And yet she could not stop noticing him. It happened during a reception on the station's observation deck. Hundreds of diplomats had gathered to celebrate some trade agreement that Valsara had already forgotten. She stood near the windows, watching the stars. When the lights flickered, a moment later, there was a loud bang from somewhere below. The floor shook. People screamed. Power surge, someone shouted. The reactor containment system failed. Valsara felt a wave of chaotic thoughts crash against her mind as panic spread through the crowd. Her shields, already strained from hours of social interaction, began to crack. She pressed her hands to her temples trying to hold herself together. And then something strange happened. The surge of energy from the damaged systems washed through the room, and for one brief moment it disrupted everything. The shield shattered completely. Her mind suddenly, unprotected, reached out blindly for anything to anchor itself to. It found Daniel Carter for 3 heartbeats. She was inside his mind. She saw fragments of memory, sharp and vivid. Fire and smoke, the sound of weapons, bodies on the ground, running through corridors filled with screaming, and through it all, one image repeated over and over: her own face. She saw herself through his eyes, walking through the station, attending meetings, standing by windows. She felt his constant attention, his awareness of every exit and every potential threat. She felt something fierce and protective wrapped around every thought of her. And then the connection broke. Valsara gasped and stumbled backward. Her shield slammed back into place, but the damage was done. She had seen something she was never meant to see. Daniel was at her side in an instant. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was calm, but she could see something in his eyes now. Flicker of concern that had not been there before. "I am fine," she lied. Her hearts were pounding. "The surge disrupted my shields." It was disorienting. He studied her for a moment, and she had the terrible feeling that he knew exactly what had happened. But he said nothing. He simply nodded and stepped back, giving her space. "Situation is under control," he said. "The engineering team is handling the reactor. We should move you to a secure location until they confirm it's safe." She let him lead her away from the crowd, her mind spinning with questions. What had she seen? Why did this human have so many memories of her? They had only met a few days ago, but in his mind she had seen months of watching, protecting, planning. It made no sense unless everything she thought she knew was wrong. That night, alone in her quarters, Valsara could not sleep. She kept seeing those fragments of memory, the fire, the violence, and beneath it, all that fierce protectiveness that wrapped around her image like armor. Why would a human she barely knew have such feelings about her? Why would he have memories of protecting her when nothing had happened? She thought about going to Commander Tenrique with her concerns. He was her superior after all. He would know what to do, but something stopped her. A small voice in the back of her mind whispered that she should not trust anyone, not yet, not until she understood what was really happening. She made a decision. She would investigate Daniel Carter herself. She would find out who he really was and why he seemed to care so much about keeping her safe. She did not know it yet, but that decision would change everything she believed about humans, about her own people, and about the very nature of truth itself. Outside her window, the stars burned cold and distant, keeping their secrets just as Daniel Carter kept his. Valsara spent the next 3 days searching for answers. She used her diplomatic access to enter parts of the station's database that were normally restricted. She read reports, cross-referenced personnel files, and slowly began to piece together a picture that made her blood run cold. Daniel Carter's official file was almost empty. It listed his name, his rank, and his assignment to Unity Station. Everything else was marked classified. This alone was strange. Security officers were not usually important enough to have classified histories. She dug deeper. She found records of ship transfers and duty assignments. She traced his path backward through the years and discovered that he had served during the Human Collective War. He had been part of something called Special Operations Division, a unit that did not officially exist in any public records, but the most disturbing discovery came when she found a single document buried in an encrypted archive. It was a transfer request filed 6 months ago. Daniel Carter had asked to be reassigned to Galactic Unity Station. The request had been approved immediately, which was unusual for such a remote posting. The date on the request matched exactly with the day Velsara had been assigned to the station. She sat back in her chair and stared at the screen. This was not coincidence. Daniel had come here specifically because she was coming here. He had been watching her from the very beginning, but why was he a threat? Was he planning something against her? She thought about the memories she had seen in his mind, the fire, the violence, yes, but also that fierce protectiveness that had not felt like the mind of an enemy. She needed more information. She needed to understand why the humans were so interested in her. It took her another day to find the answer, and when she did, she wished she had not. Buried in the intelligence archives was a report from 6 months ago. The Zari intelligence had intercepted human communications about something called Protocol Shepard. The communications mentioned her name specifically. Her government had concluded that the humans were planning to kidnap or harm her, but when Velsara read the actual intercepted messages, she saw a very different picture. The humans had discovered an assassination plot. Someone wanted Velsara dead. The humans had learned about it through their own intelligence networks, and they had decided to protect her without telling anyone. Daniel Carter had been assigned to watch over her to keep her safe from threats she did not know existed, and the people who wanted her dead were not aliens or enemies of her people. They were theory. Velsara felt sick. She read the report again and again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words remained the same. Faction within her own government had ordered her assassination. They wanted her killed far from home in a place where it could be blamed on humans. But why? What had she done to deserve death? The answer came to her slowly, painfully. Her father had been a reformist, one of the few Thesari leaders who had argued for peace with humanity. He had died 2 years ago in what was officially called an accident, but Velar had always suspected it was murder. Now she understood. Her father's enemies saw her as a symbol. As long as she lived, the reformist movement had hope. By killing her and blaming the humans, they could destroy any chance of peace between their species. She did not know who to trust. She could not go to Commander Tinrich. For all she knew, he was part of the conspiracy. She could not contact her government. They might be the ones trying to kill her. There was only one person she could turn to, and the thought filled her with shame. She had treated him with contempt since the day they met. She had dismissed him as a primitive from a death world, and all along he had been risking his life to protect her. She found Daniel in the security office reviewing patrol schedules. When she entered, he looked up with that same calm expression he always wore. Diplomat Velsara, he said. How can I help you? She closed the door behind her. I know, she said. Her voice was shaking. I know why you're here. I know about Protocol Shepard. I know someone wants me dead. For a long moment Daniel said nothing, then he sighed and set down his data pad. How did you find out I'm a mind waver? Finding secrets is what we do, she stepped closer to him, the power surged. Last week my shields failed, I saw. Inside your mind, I saw memories of you protecting me. I didn't understand then. But I do now. Daniel's jaw tightened. You weren't supposed to know. It was safer that way. Safer for who? Fool you. He stood up and faced her. For the first time she saw real emotion in his eyes. Worry, frustration, and something else she could not name. The people who want you dead are powerful. If they knew you were aware of the threat, they would accelerate their plans. As long as you seemed innocent and unaware, they were content to wait for the right moment. So you just watched me, Valsa felt anger rising in her chest. You let me walk around like bait while you waited for someone to try to kill me. I was protecting you, Daniel said firmly. Every moment of every day, I checked every room before you entered it. I scanned every face in every crowd. I mapped escape routes and identified potential threats. You were never in danger because I never let you be in danger. She wanted to argue with him, but she could see the truth in his eyes. He meant every word. Why, she asked, why do you care what happens to me? I've treated you terribly since we met. I called you primitive. I tried to have you reassigned. Daniel was quiet for a moment, then he said, because you represent something important. Your father believed in peace. He believed that our species could learn to understand each other instead of fear each other. When he died, that dream almost died with him, but you're still here, and as long as you're alive, there's hope. Valara felt tears forming in her eyes. She had never thought about herself that way. She was just a junior diplomat, nobody important, but Daniel saw her differently. He saw her as a symbol, as something worth protecting. What do we do now? She asked. Before Daniel could answer, an alarm began to sound throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. Daniel's face went hard. Someone knows. You found out the truth, he said. We need to move now. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the door. For the first time she did not resist. Outside, the sound of boots echoed in the corridors. Someone was coming, and they were coming fast. Daniel moved through the corridors with practice speed, pulling Valsara behind him. She struggled to keep up, her long diplomatic robes catching on corners and doorways. The alarm continued to scream overhead, painting everything in flashing red light. Where are we going? She gasped. Safe room in the human section of the station, Daniel replied. They won't be able to enter without starting a diplomatic incident, but before they could reach the next junction, a group of figures appeared at the far end of the corridor. Valsara's heart sank when she recognized the silver uniforms of the Sari security forces. And leading them was Commander Tinrich. Valsara Tinrich called out. His voice was smooth and calm, but his silver eyes held something cold and dangerous. Stop running. You are confused and frightened. The humans have filled your head with lies. Come with us and we will take you home where you will be safe. Valsara felt Daniel's hand tighten around hers. He positioned himself between her and the approaching the Sorry, she's not going anywhere with you, Daniel said. Tinrich smiled. It was not a kind smile. One human against 6. The Sari, we can read your movements. Before you make them, we can see your Strategies forming in your mind. You cannot win this fight. Try me, Daniel replied. Velsara watched the exchange. With growing horror, she knew what Tenrich said was true. Her people were natural telepaths. In combat they could predict an enemy's movements before they happened. No one could defeat the Sari in single combat, but Daniel did not seem afraid. His posture was relaxed, his breathing steady. When she reached out with her mind to read Tingrich's intention, she felt his confidence. He genuinely believed the human was no threat. Daniel, she whispered, you can't fight them. They'll know what you're going to do before you do it. Maybe, Daniel said quietly, maybe not. Humans are mind dark for a reason. Our thoughts don't work the same way yours do. Tenrich was getting impatient. Enough of this, Velsara. Your presence on this station has been compromised by human interference. You will return to Vesser immediately for evaluation and treatment. This is not a request. I'm not going anywhere with you, Velora said. Her voice was stronger now. I know what you're planning. I know about the assassination plot. I know you want me dead. For just a moment something flickered in Tenrich's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or anger. Then his expression returned to cold neutrality. You see, he said to his guards, she has been corrupted by human propaganda. She is no longer thinking clearly. We must take her by force for her own protection. Guards moved forward. Daniel shifted his stance, preparing to fight, and Velsara made a decision. Daniel, she said quickly, let me in. He glanced back at her, confused. What? Your mind? Lower your defenses and let me in. I need to understand how you think, how you fight. It's the only way I can help you. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Letting a telepath into your mind was an act of incredible trust. Most species would never allow it to humans who valued their mental privacy above almost everything else. It was almost unthinkable, but Daniel nodded. Velsara reached out with her mind and touched his consciousness. This time, there was no resistance. He had opened himself to her completely. What she found inside took her breath away. Human minds were not simple. They were not primitive. They were vast and chaotic and beautiful. Daniel's thoughts moved in patterns she had never seen before. Layers upon layers of emotion and memory and instinct, all flowing together like currents in a great ocean. She saw his training, years of combat experience, compressed into reflex and muscle memory. She saw the techniques he had learned to confuse telepaths. His surface thoughts were deliberate chaos, a storm of random images and impulses that made it impossible to predict his movements. But beneath that chaos there was something else. There was purpose. There was love. She felt his feelings for the people he protected, not just duty but genuine care. He had chosen to spend his life keeping others safe because he believed it mattered. Every person he saved was a victory. Every life protected was a reason to keep going, and she felt his feelings for her. He saw her as a light in the darkness. He believed in her potential to change things, to bridge the gap between species. He would die for her, not because he was ordered to, but because he could not imagine a universe where she did not exist. The depth of his conviction staggered her. She had never felt anything like it from her own people. The Lazari were logical, controlled, careful. They did not feel things so deeply, but humans did. Humans loved and hated and feared and hoped with an intensity that was almost overwhelming. Their emotions were not weaknesses. They were fuel driving them forward when any sensible being would have given up. She understood now why humans were mind dark. It was not because they were simple, it was because they were too complex. Their minds contained multitudes, storms of feeling that no telepath could easily navigate. Connection lasted only seconds, but it changed everything. Balsara pulled back, her head spinning. Daniel blinked, regaining his focus. Well, he asked. Fight them, she said. I'll guide you. The Dasari guards attacked 6 against 1. They moved with telepathic precision, each one knowing what the others were thinking, but Daniel moved like water flowing around stones. His thoughts were chaos, but his body was perfectly controlled. Viesara stayed connected to him, feeding him information about what the Dari were planning. She could read their intentions, and she passed that knowledge to Daniel. The first guard reached for Daniel and found only empty air. Daniel had already moved, his elbow striking the guard's throat. The second guard anticipated an attack from the right and blocked that direction. Daniel attacked from the left instead. It was beautiful and terrible. Daniel's body and mind working together as one. In less than a minute, all 6 guards were on the ground. Tinrich stood alone, his silver eyes wide with something that looked like fear. How, he demanded. How did you do that? Daniel straightened up. He was breathing hard, but he was smiling. Humans are full of surprises. Tinrich's communicator crackled, a voice spoken rapidly. Sorry. His expression went from fear to something like triumph. It doesn't matter, he said. A warship is coming. It will be here within the hour. You cannot fight an entire ship. He turned and ran, disappearing down the corridor before they could stop him. Daniel looked at Velsara. A warship. She nodded, her heart's heavy. A plan for this, he knew. Someone might interfere with his assassination plot. The warship is his backup. If they can't kill me quietly, they'll do it loudly and blame it on you. Then we need to find another way. Daniel said, come on, the human commander needs to know what's happening. He took her hand again, and this time she held on tight. She had seen inside his mind, felt the truth of who he was. He was not a primitive from a death world. He was a guardian, fierce and gentle, strong and kind, and she would not let his people be blamed for her death. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Captain Lara Pierce was a woman who had seen many strange things during her career. She had fought in the human collective war. She had negotiated with species that communicated through color and scent. She had survived assassination attempts, engine failures, and diplomatic incidents that could have started interstellar wars. But when Daniel Carter walked into her office with a Dasari diplomat and told her that a conspiracy within the Dasari government was planning to murder the young woman and blame it on humanity, she needed a moment to process. Let me understand this, she said slowly. You're telling me that the Vasari sent one of their own people here to be killed, and they plan to use her death as an excuse to attack us? Yes, Captain, Daniel said. And you've known about this for how long? 6 months. Human intelligence discovered the plot shortly after diplomats was assigned to the station. I was sent here to protect her. Lara leaned back in her chair and rubbed her temples. And you didn't think to mention this to me earlier? The Operation was classified. Need to know only. I apologize for keeping you in the dark, Lar looked at Velsara, who stood beside Daniel with an expression of exhausted determination. The young Dari had clearly been through something difficult. Her silver eyes were red-rimmed and her hands were shaking slightly. Is all of this true? Lara asked. Velsara nodded. I have seen the evidence. Commander Tenrique is part of the conspiracy. He has called for a warship to extract me by force. If I return to Decessor, I will be killed and my death will be used to justify a war against your people, and if we refuse to hand you over, then they will claim we kidnapped her, Daniel said. Either way, they get their war. Laura was silent for a long moment, then she stood up and walked to her desk. Terminal. The Desari warship will be here in approximately 40 minutes, she said. I'm putting the station on defensive alert and contacting Earth Command. We need guidance on how to handle this, Captain. Daniel said carefully. Earth Command will tell you to avoid a diplomatic incident. They'll tell you to hand her over, maybe, but I don't take orders from people who want to start wars based on lies. Laura's eyes were hard. Diplomat Velara came to this station under diplomatic protection until I see evidence that she's committed a crime. She stays under my protection. Velsara felt tears forming in her eyes. You would risk war with my people for me. I'm risking war for the truth, Ra said firmly. There's a difference. The next 30 minutes were chaos. Station security locked down the diplomatic quarter and evacuated non-essential personnel. Human Marines took positions at every entrance. An access point, communication channels flooded with urgent messages from Earth, from a dozen other species who had heard rumors of what was happening. Commander Tenrique broadcast his ultimatum to the entire station. His voice echoed through the corridors, cold and imperious. The human authorities are holding a Desari citizen against her will. This is an act of aggression against the Desari collective. We demand the immediate release of diplomat Velsara if she is not surrendered within 1 hour. The warship voice of justice will take whatever action is necessary to retrieve her. Daniel listened to the broadcast with growing anger. He's lying, he said. Every word of it is a lie. People believe what they want to believe, Sarara said quietly. My people have been taught to fear and hate humans for generations. They will accept Tenrique's story because it matches what they already think they know. Then we need to show them something different, Daniel said. Something they can't ignore. But there was no time to plan. The alarm sounded again and the station shook as the warship dropped out of hyperspace much closer than anyone expected. The voice of justice was enormous, a massive vessel bristling with weapons. It hung in space like a predator watching its prey. They're launching boarding shuttles. Someone reported 8 of them. They'll reach the station in 15 minutes. Elver began issuing orders. Marines moved to defensive positions. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut. Throughout the station, non-Nazari species evacuated the affected areas. Velsara watched the preparations with growing despair. These humans were preparing to die for her. They were strangers, people she had dismissed as primitives, and they were willing to fight and bleed to protect her. This is wrong, she said. I can't let you sacrifice yourselves. It's not your choice, Daniel said. He was checking his weapon, his movements calm and Practiced, we decided to protect you. That's what we do, but why? I don't understand why you care so much. Daniel stopped and looked at her. His gray eyes were soft, but there was steel beneath them. Because it's right, he said. Simply because you're innocent and they want to kill you for politics, because your father believed in peace and you carry that belief inside you, because if we let them win, everything gets worse. He smiled slightly, and because you're worth protecting, I knew that the moment I saw you step off that transport ship. Valara felt something shift inside her. All her life she had been taught that humans were inferior, that they were dangerous animals who acted on instinct rather than reason, but the man standing in front of her was neither simple nor savage. He was kind and brave and good. And he saw something in her that she had never seen in herself. The first boarding shuttle docked with the station. The Zari soldiers poured out, their silver uniforms gleaming under the harsh station lights. They moved with telepathic coordination, each one knowing exactly what the others were thinking. The humans met them at the first checkpoint. The fighting was brutal. The Visari had numbers and telepathy. The humans had determination and something else, something that could feel even without touching their minds. They fought not because they were ordered to, but because they believed in what they were doing. Daniel was at the front, his movements fluid and unpredictable. Other humans fell around him, wounded or worse, but he kept fighting. Every time an Asari soldier got close to the door behind which Felsara was hiding, Daniel was there to stop them. The battle lasted for what felt like hours. In reality, it was only 20 minutes. When it was over, the first wave of the Sari had been pushed back, but the humans had suffered heavy losses and more shuttles were approaching. Daniel stumbled into the safe room, bleeding from a wound on his shoulder. His face was pale, but his eyes were still fierce. They'll breach the final door soon, he said. We're running out of time. Viesara looked at him, at this human who had given everything to protect her, and she made a decision. I know what to do, she said. I know how to end this. Daniel frowned. What are you planning? The truth, she said. It's time everyone knows the truth. Outside, the sounds of battle grew louder. The warship broadcast its final warning, demanding immediate surrender, and Valara began to prepare for the most important moment of her life. Velar stood in the center of the station's communication hub, her hands pressed against the main transmission console. Around her, technicians worked frantically, following her instructions, even as explosions shook the walls. This is insane, one of them muttered. You want to broadcast on every frequency that will reach every ship and station in 3 sectors. That's exactly what I want, Velsara said. Daniel stood guard at the door, his wounded shoulder wrapped in hasty bandages. He had refused to leave her side. Even his Captain Pierce ordered the remaining defenders to fall back to the final defensive line. You don't have to do this, he said without turning around. We can still fight. We can hold them off until reinforcements arrive. How many more people have to die for me? Velsara asked. How many more humans have to bleed while my people chase a lie? She shook her head. No, this ends now. One way or another. The console beeped. Connection was ready. Velsara took a deep breath and closed her eyes. What she was about to do would change everything. She would be exposing the darkest secrets of her own government. She would be betraying the people who had raised her, taught her, shaped her into who she was, but those same people had murdered her father. They had tried to murder her. They were willing to start a war and kill thousands just to maintain their power. She opened her eyes and began to speak. My name is Velsara, daughter of Timrich, and I am speaking to everyone who can hear my voice, the sorry humans and all the species of the galactic community. What I am about to tell you is the truth, and I will prove it. She reached out with her mind and connected to the transmission array. It was a technique only the most skilled mindweavers could perform, and it required enormous concentration. But she had been preparing for this moment her entire life without knowing it. She broadcast her memories directly into the transmission. Every species in range with any form of receiving equipment would see what she saw, not just words but images, feelings, the full truth of what had happened. She showed them Daniel's memories first. With his permission, she transmitted everything he had witnessed, the intelligence reports about the assassination plot, the months of watching and protecting, the orders from human command to keep her safe at any cost. Then she showed them her own discoveries, the intercepted communications, Tinrich's involvement, the conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the sorry government. She showed them how her father had died, not in an accident, but murdered by people who feared his calls for peace. And finally she showed them what she had felt inside Daniel's mind. She broadcast the love, the loyalty, the fierce protectiveness that had stunned her when she first touched his thoughts. She let the universe feel what humans were really like beneath their unreadable surfaces, not primitives, not monsters, but beings of deep emotion and powerful conviction. The broadcast lasted only 3 minutes. But in those 3 minutes, the lie that had shaped relations between humans and the Zari for generations crumbled into dust. Silence fell over the station. The fighting stopped. The Zari soldiers lowered their weapons, staring at nothing as they processed what they had just witnessed. On the warship, officers turned to look at each other in shock and confusion. Commander Tenrich's voice cut through the silence. He was screaming into his communicator, ordering the attack to continue, demanding that Velsara be captured and silenced, but no one was listening anymore. The soldiers who had been trying to kill her minutes ago now stood motionless, many of them weeping. They had felt the truth. They had seen inside the mind of a human and discovered not an enemy but a potential friend. One by one they dropped their weapons and surrendered on the warship. The captain relieved himself of command and ordered the ship to stand down. He did not fire on a station after what he had just witnessed. He would rather face court martial and become a murderer. And across 3 sectors, billions of beings watched and listened and felt the truth that Velsara had given them. Not all of them would accept it. Some would call it a trick, a fabrication, a human plot. But enough would believe, enough would question what they had been told, enough would start to wonder if peace was possible. After all, in the aftermath, Tinrich tried to flee. He made it to an escape pod before station security caught him. When they dragged him out, he was ranting about betrayal and dishonor, about the weakness of allowing enemies to live. No one listened. His own people turned away in disgust. Captain Laura Pierce, found still standing at the communication console. Trembling with exhaustion, the young Theory had given everything she had to make that broadcast. She could barely stand. That was quite a speech, Pi said. Visara tried to smile. It was the truth. The truth is easy, not always. Pierce glanced at Daniel, who had finally allowed a medic to treat his wounds. You're welcome to stay here as long as you need. I don't think going home is a good idea right now. No, Valser agreed. Not yet. But someday. Days passed. The political situation remained chaotic, but the immediate crisis was over. The sorry reformists, emboldened by the broadcast, began openly challenging the factions that had conspired against Valsara. Human diplomats reached out to offer support. Other species, impressed by humanity's willingness to risk war for the sake of one person, reconsidered their own relationships with the humans. Daniel was healing well. The wound had been serious but not life-threatening. He spent most of his recovery time in Velsar's quarters, talking with her for hours about everything and nothing. What happens now? She asked him one evening. They were sitting by the viewport watching ships come and go from the station. I don't know, he admitted. My mission was to protect you. I suppose that's technically complete now, so you leave. He was quiet for a moment. That depends. Do you want me to leave? Tsar turned to face him. She had spent weeks inside his mind. She knew his thoughts, his fears, his hopes. She knew him better than she knew anyone in the universe. No, she said, I don't want you to leave, but I don't want you to stay because you feel obligated. I want you to stay because you want to. Daniel smiled. It was a real smile, warm and genuine, the kind she had rarely seen on his face. I spent 6 months watching you from a distance, he said, protecting you without being able to talk to you. I think I'd like to try something different. I'd like to be your friend if you'll let me. Vilara felt something bloom in her chest, a warmth she had never experienced before. I would like that too, she said. They sat together in comfortable silence as the stars turned slowly outside the window. Ships arrived carrying diplomats, eager to build new relationships. Messages flooded in from across the galaxy, some angry, some grateful, some simply curious. The work was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead, enemies who refused to accept the truth, obstacles that seemed impossible to overcome. But for the first time in her life, Belsara did not feel alone. She had found something she never expected to find among the mind dark humans. She had found a home. And in the years that followed, when beings across the galaxy told the story of how peace began between humans and the Sari, they always started with the same words. She scanned the human's mind by accident and discovered he had been protecting her all along. It was a good beginning, Belsaro thought, and every good story had to start somewhere. The end.